Hello and welcome to another episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed, and this is a pretty big deal because we are live and in person today with Barry Danielian. How are you doing, Barry?
I'm doing good. A little frazzled. We're 2 weeks into a 3-week run of Canadian dates.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're a little tired, and this is actually, we're heading into almost 2 years of touring. Not consistently, but pretty consistently.
Yeah.
So, we're heading to the finish line. We end in a week from today. We actually end in Vancouver, and then we got a little bit of a break. So everybody's kind of, as much as we're having a great time and the audiences are incredible, we're all kind of looking forward to getting home and having a little downtime with our families too.
For sure. Absolutely. Now, you were kind of mentioning you have performed here in Calgary before. Is that right?
Yeah. I was here. Tower of Power always would do Canadian dates in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But, we were doing like tour bus tours, so I didn't really get to hang. The good thing about Bruce's gig is we do stay in one place for a few days, so I get to actually see the town. But with Tower, it's like we drive in, sound check, dinner, show, get on the tour bus to the next stop.
Right. Yeah.
So this is my first time actually being here for a couple days.
Right. Nice.
We got in last night, and it's great. It's great to just be working and see different places.
For sure. And this is your first time here with Bruce then.
Yes, this is my first time. We came to Canada with Bruce during the Wrecking Ball tour. I don't recall that we played Calgary. I think we just did Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, maybe.
So it's interesting because I've looked it up. I always like to sort of see when artists come here to Calgary, and so Bruce has only played here 2 times.
Oh wow!
He played here once in the early '90s on the Human Touch tour. So that was the one without the E Street Band,
right?
And then he played here on the Rising tour.
Oh, okay.
So it's been 20 years since he last was here, and I think it's going to be a big show because we often don't get artists of his level through here.
Right.
It's pretty rare to have someone as big as Bruce come to Calgary, and it was interesting. I looked up, on Ticketmaster, and I saw they're actually selling the very upper seats of the Saddle Dome, which they almost never do for concerts.
Oh wow!
So
we're rocking.
It's a big show.
Well,
No pressure.
No. The audiences up here have been great. In fact, I was talking with one of the management people about, man, this time it feels more like our European audiences in terms of the energy level. And he agreed with me. It's just the crowds here have been off the hook, and it affects us because we give it back to them. You know? So it's like a symbiotic relationship between the crowds and us.
For sure, yeah.
It's been great. It's really been great.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the thing is like outside of like, I feel like Toronto and Vancouver get all the shows up here, but yeah, it's kind of, the other cities don't get as much, so it is, we definitely do show up for sure.
Great. Well, we're the band's on fire, and it's going to be a great show. They're all great shows. I mean, I always tell my wife's like, "How's the show?" And I'm like, "They're all great. They're all different, but they're all great. This band doesn't have bad shows. It just doesn't happen."
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to be speaking with you today for a number of reasons. First off, you and I have a common connection with Mr. Gene Foley, who, of
Dr.
course,
Gene,
he was the very first guest I actually had on the podcast.
Right.
And, he works with both of us, which is great. So shout out to Gene.
Shout out to Gene. Yeah, Gene and I actually met. This is going to be interesting because it ties into another guest that you had. Chuck Berge and I were both doing the Moving Out Broadway show, which was Billy Joel's music.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Gene. He came to see the show, and he's like, wow, like we connected, and we've maintained a relationship all these years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was going to mention, you brought up Chuck because, of course, we had Chuck on the show twice, actually, now. And he, we got to go down to Seattle when Billy Joel was playing there this past May.
Right.
And we did an in-person interview with Chuck, and it was great because, Chuck's just such a nice guy.
He's such a beautiful person. Yeah, and Chuck's great. And incredible player.
Mm-hmm. And he, after the interview, he was like, "Oh, you guys should come to the after party following the show," which was like wild to, get to see, something like that.
Behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was great because, we were mingling with, like Crystal Taliaferro and Andy Sachon. And it was funny. We were talking at one point with Chuck and Andy. And, they were asking us about our music and, I mentioned how Bruce is like my biggest influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Bruce is coming to Calgary this fall and I want to try and do something like that. Like what we're doing here with you guys when they're here. And both Chuck and Andy immediately said, "Oh, we'll get Barry Danielian. We know Barry."
Right.
So,
I've worked with Billy before, and I'm friends with all the guys, and some of whom, like Mark Rivera. Mark and I go back almost 40 years. We did like wedding gigs together.
Yeah.
And actually, Mark was really the one that encouraged me. I put out my first record in 2006. He was really the guy that's like, man, you got to do your own thing, do your own thing, do your own thing. But yeah, those guys are all great. They're good friends. And, it's just great to see everybody still out there doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I would love to, I always start out these podcasts by asking, what was the first song or the first album you remember hearing that got you into music?
That got me into music. Well, that's kind of like a double-layered question because my parents played a lot of music. There was constantly music around the house when I was growing up. My father was he was a fan of big band music and classical music. So I heard that stuff all the time. And my mother is Italian, so I heard Mario Lanza. And she also liked jazz. She was a big Ahmad Jamal fan. So I probably from the time I was 7 or 8, I was listening to Live at the Penthouse by Ahmad Jamal and Count Basie and Stan Kenton. But the record that probably really, 2 records, Herbie Hancock Thrust and Earth, Wind and Fire Spirit. Those 2 records just were the ones that made me know for sure this is what I want to do.
Right. Yeah.
So those 2 records.
Okay.
But music was in the mix. My parents didn't play music, but music was always around in the atmosphere. And my uncle was a country western singer and guitar player.
Okay.
Not professionally, but he played in local bars and he played for us when we were kids. And so, when I would go to his house, it was like Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and that type of stuff.
The good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just very saturated with music across different genres. And I think that's had a big impact on my career because I would say even though in my heart of hearts, I love playing jazz the most because it's the most challenging music to play for me, in my opinion. But I'm able to go into lots of different areas and groove and I'm comfortable playing lots of different styles of music. And I think a lot of it had to do with just hearing different types of music when I was a kid.
For sure, yeah. And was it always trumpet for you?
No, actually, I started as a guitar player because of my uncle.
Right.
And I switched. I heard Louis Armstrong on, I don't know if it was Merv Griffin or one of those TV variety shows that they had in the 70s. And when I heard Louis Armstrong play, the sound of the trumpet really got me. And so I switched to trumpet, but I started out with guitar and I always played piano. I wasn't formally trained, but I kind of would sit down and figure out chords and stuff. I always had a pretty good ear.
Right.
So I was able to sit down and listen to tunes, and I have a curious mind, so I'm always, what's that? Let me figure this out. So piano is still in the mix because I produce and write music. I have a studio at home. So you kind of have to have I would say I'm like an arranger's piano player. I don't have a lot of chops, but... And then recently, Nils Lofgren hooked me up with a beautiful gift of a guitar because I wanted to start getting back to learning guitar.
Nice.
Mostly for writing because I kind of had this feeling that with keyboards and piano, I kind of seem to go to the same places all the time. And maybe with a different instrument, it takes you into different places or just your thought process is different.
Yeah.
So I started, picking up the guitar again and trying to get some calluses going and learning some block chords. And that's kind of my project for when we end this leg of the tour and I have a little break is to start shedding a little more on guitar.
Nice. And it's kind of funny, actually. I briefly was a trumpet player.
Oh, wow. Well, you were smart.
In middle school band, that's what I played. So I still, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C.
Yeah, well
I still
done.
got that, but I haven't touched one in 10 years probably. So it's...
I mean, I play all the brass. At home. I have a bass trumpet and a valve trombone, and piccolo trumpets and kind of all the brass stuff. Because oftentimes people will call me to like kind of hook up a brass section
Mm-hmm.
for them. If they have a budget, then I say, well, have Ozzy play the trombone. Don't have me play.
Right.
But yeah, I like the challenge, and like I said, I'm like very curious minded. So if there's something that interests me, I'm always going to try and figure out what it is and see if I can approach it on some level.
For sure. Yeah. And then, how did you sort of get started with, doing this line of work where you're, working with some of the biggest people in music?
Well, man, when I was coming up, and I'm talking about like I finished music school in the early 80s, there was at that point, technology didn't quite hit yet.
Mm-hmm.
So there was still like kind of I would go sub for other trumpet players. And then the contractor would kind of, oh, that guy that subbed you, he did a great job. I need a trumpet player for another session, and my usual guy can't make it, so let me call this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go in and I do a good job, and now I'm on their radar, and you kind of work your way up the ranks. As far as like the connection to Bruce's gig really starts probably around 1988. I was playing with Southside Johnny and the Jukes.
Right.
And so through that gig, obviously I met Steve Van Zandt because Steve was writing a lot of material, producing a lot of the material. And then I met Bruce as well. And so I was just kind of in that circle. And, fast forward maybe 20 years or so, Bruce wanted horns. I think it was on The Promise.
Yeah.
And so Kurt called me up, Kurt Ram, I'm putting together a horn section, come on in. And Bruce likes familiar faces. So he kind of recognized me and remembered me probably from the Jukes. And I also think it's like, what's really helped me a lot in my career is like the great Ray Charles said, every music has its soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, what that means is the essence of what somebody's trying to say, like what is the vision of this artist. And so I think for a trumpet player or for any musician, you go in and you're able to figure out what that is. And that makes the artist feel comfortable because like they feel like you get what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to like deliver the goods musically. And so I remember Bruce said to me one time, like I auditioned in 2012 to be part of the band, to be the horn section of the touring band. And he said to me, when you came in, the horn section sounded much better, but you got it. I could tell that you got it. And so I think that's just been not a calling card necessarily, but just an asset. And I think part of it is just, my training as a jazz musician. As a jazz musician, you're really supposed to be like, have this openness or this flexibility to be able to adapt to whatever the situation is because it's improvised based music. But even if you're not improvising, to be adaptive or adaptable in terms of your ability to conceptualize what the music is that you're playing and who you're playing with.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just been an asset for me. And I think that's what's helped me throughout my career to be able to get gigs across like a real wide range of genres.
Yeah, for sure. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is an award-winning digital marketing company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, working with clients in different industries from all over North America, including Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Marvel Marketing services include website design and development, website maintenance, search engine optimization, public relations services, and social media management, amongst others. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by GuitarWorks. One of Canada's top independent music stores for over 30 years, GuitarWorks carries a huge selection of musical instruments from the biggest brands in music, including Gibson, Fender, Martin, Yamaha, and Paul Reed Smith. Visit any of their 3 Calgary locations or shop online at guitarworks.ca and join the Guitar Perks program to earn money back with every purchase. GuitarWorks, your total guitar store. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Recordland, home to the largest selection of music in Canada. Buy, sell, and trade tapes, CDs, and vinyl. Located in Calgary's Inglewood neighborhood on 9th Avenue Southeast, visit them in person or on Instagram at Recordland Calgary. So, we were talking here. The
Oh,
Promise.
yeah, bingo. There
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
So this was the first record you worked on with
That
Bruce?
was the first one with Bruce. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, I love this album. There's a lot of great songs and a lot of songs where it's like, how did this not get on Darkness on the Edge of Town? And it's funny because one of the tracks with, a really strong trumpet part is The Broken Hearted.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, like, did Bruce kind of have an idea of what he wanted on that, or did you guys kind of have to work something out?
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, he, like so many great artists, at least my observation is that he has a pretty clear vision of what, like, he kind of can hear the finished product.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he comes up with the parts. And then if he doesn't like it, so try this or try that. And occasionally we'll say, well, what if we did this? You offer like some suggestions in terms of not so much the part, but the nuance of orchestrating horns, what register things could be in.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, man, Bruce, he knows what he wants and he sings the parts. And most of the time it's stuff that really is pretty comfortable in terms of it sounds like a horn part.
Yep.
Whereas I've worked for other artists where they come up with horn parts that like, they don't even feel like horn parts.
Yeah.
It feels like something else. He has he's just got a great sensibility about music, and he's very clear-minded in terms of what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
There's never any guessing. Like, he knows what he wants, and he's very great about articulating and giving us clear direction.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's was it also like on this record, was it kind of weird to be, working on songs that had been like sitting in the vault for 30 years?
Not for me, because I was unaware of that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and now in hindsight, I mean, he's so prolific that there's so much material always, percolating or sitting in the back burner. And as somebody who writes myself, sometimes things, I always viewed songs as like your children,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them can be ready for birth in 9 months.
Yep.
Some of them are ready for birth in a day, and some of them need to gestate for years.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe the sentiment or the message of the tune, maybe you have to live more life for that message to be clear.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah.
As somebody who's kind of on the outside looking in.
Right. That's a song
Yeah.
on that record. And it's so cool, just kind of as an aside here, it's so cool that Bruce is still super prolific at this point in his career, right? Like, going back to Billy Joel as an example, like, Billy is, like with Chuck's been with Billy for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
But Billy hasn't put out a record in 30. So Chuck
Right.
has only worked with him in a touring capacity. But it's cool that with you and Bruce, you've had the chance to play on his albums and tour with him.
Right. No, Bruce he's very prolific, man. And I think he's a very thoughtful and insightful person. And so people like that are always going to have something to say
Yeah.
about what's going on in the world and what's going on in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And like, he's just a very dedicated, sincere, diligent person with his craft.
Mm-hmm.
He's always working on things. Whereas I think with some artists, maybe they reach a point where they feel like that they've said what they need to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no judgment about any of that. It's just everybody's path is different like that. And then some people maybe were not as prolific in the early part of their career. Maybe they relied more on external writers or other people coming in, and then they became more prolific as they got older.
Yeah.
So everybody's musical path is different, and I think people come to different things at different times for different reasons. But yeah, I mean, Bruce is, I'm just like awestruck at how at this stage of the game, in a lot of ways, he's still like the kid that's 15 years old that's still like just on fire and inspired about music.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you see him turn into that when he hits the stage.
For sure.
It's unbelievable. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. Then Sort of continuing on with records that you've played on, this was another one.
Oh yeah,
Western
yeah.
Stars.
I love that record. I love that record. I thought it was just an elegant, beautiful record.
It's definitely. I think you can make a case that it's probably one of the most like different records that Bruce has made, because it's kind of like a tribute to sort of like the Glenn Campbell era of country music.
Yep. And the lush orchestration.
Well, I was going to mention that because it's, from a horn perspective, it's definitely more like kind of on the orchestral side of things. Not, usually when Bruce uses horns, it's like 10th Avenue Freeze Out, right?
Right.
So, yeah, was it different in that regard?
No, it totally was. It was, and I mean, that's a type of playing that I'm very comfortable with. So it was nice to kind of get to flex those chops a little bit, because it's just a different horns being used in a slightly different color than how they're traditionally used, and rock horns or rock/soul horns. This was really more like almost like film scorey orchestral style of writing.
For sure.
And then when we did the documentary, we had French horns and the string section. A lot of my friends from the New York Philharmonic were in the string section, and it was just it was really cool. And it was really cool just to see how Bruce delivered those songs just from a vocal standpoint. Because I think it was, for him, he got maybe to flex some different kind of chops as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually saw that in the theater. When it came out.
Too, yeah. My wife and kids and I went. I just thought it was beautiful, and the stories are really beautiful. I can't remember the title of the tune, but the one about the stunt man, this guy who just beats himself up to death, but he can still put his boots on, he can still walk. There was a lot that I related to in that song. Maybe being a martial artist and seeing some of my friends that are professional fighters that are older and they've paid the price for that, physically. Yeah. So that tune really resonated with me a lot.
And I mean, that's another topic Bruce has directly touched on with The Wrestler.
Right.
Which is a great song.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And then, more recently, his most recent album, another one you played on here, Only the Strong Survive.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was a lot of fun.
The soul covers, basically.
He sang his off on that. He sounded so great on those, and it was great to see. I always dig artists that have achieved the level like that he has, but also are into putting themselves into slightly different contexts musically.
Yeah.
Because he could continue to do what he's always done, which would be equally as great. But the fact that he's like, wow, these tunes by these artists that had such an influence on me, I'm going to do my version of it. I really enjoyed playing on that record. It was a lot of fun.
For sure. And, the one, for me, the standout track is Night Shift, the cover of the Commodores hit from the 80s there. And, that was obviously the original version of the song is more kind of like in a synth pop style. So was that kind of, did it feel like working on a different song almost because you were like adding these horn parts and more sort of acoustic elements to the track? Or
no, not really, because I think the sentiment, I think Bruce's vocal performance still captured the sentiment of the tune in such a beautiful way that I didn't really feel that way about it.
Right.
Like that it's, we're doing this different thing to this tune. It was just like, this is Bruce's interpretation of this tune that the Commodores did.
Yeah.
And it's very natural. It feels very natural, and the crowd loves it. It's kind of a different moment in the show.
For sure. Yeah. It's funny. So I was sort of going to get into it, but I saw you guys for the very first time last year in Seattle. I went down to Seattle to see you guys play there. And unfortunately, that was like one of the only shows on this tour where Night Shift didn't get performed, because I believe Curtis was sick. I think
somebody had COVID. Yeah, and we didn't do it.
And my dad and I were saying, like, that would have been nice to hear. It was too bad. So, yeah, hopefully tomorrow it's all in there.
Yeah. Well, everybody's healthy, so that's great.
Yeah, for sure. And, talking about sort of the current tour right now. It's kind of nice because actually just recently the Road Diary documentary came out.
Mm-hmm.
I actually also had the chance to see that in the theater because they played it here at the Calgary
Oh,
Film
great,
Festival.
great, yeah.
So, and you know, it's been great like seeing you guys on tour because of course I became a fan of Bruce in 2017. So I just missed the 2016 tour. And then I had to wait 6 years
Right.
to finally get the chance to see him.
Yeah, COVID jammed us all up.
Mm-hmm. And other projects going on and
Right.
that sort of thing. But so, you know, it was really meaningful for me to finally get the chance to see you guys. But like, has it just been, you know, equally as meaningful for the band to finally get back on the road again?
Yeah, it's been great, man. I think what COVID did for a lot of us was, I mean, for me, it was I've been playing professionally since I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time in my life that I went that long not playing in front of people.
Yeah.
And not going out to do gigs at night. Like, it was just kind of strange. You know, the plus side was maybe like, okay, I got to be home and have dinner with my family and watch Jeopardy and hang out. And that was great because usually I don't get to do that. Usually I'm leaving the house by 6 o'clock going to a gig.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. But, you know, it was really difficult not to be able to play in front of people, even though there were recordings going on and we were doing like with different friends of mine, we were doing like little video projects. Just to put stuff out, just to feel like you were still playing.
Yeah.
But I think when we got the word that the tour was going to happen, I think we all had missed it so much playing
Mm-hmm.
that it meant more. There was like what's the word I'm looking for? Not a heaviness in the sense of seriousness, but just the meaningfulness of that we get to go out and play music and see the faces of these people, like how much joy this
Mm-hmm.
music and how much joy we're bringing to them. And then they give it back to us.
Yeah.
And that energizes us to play even more and better. And it's just kind of like this circle, this symbiotic thing that happens. And I think that not that hasn't happened before. It always happens before. I just think it meant more now because we had those 2 years where none of us were able to play live,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure.
And for the people too, I think like a lot of people that took for granted maybe the fact that on any given night they could go hear whoever, then that got taken away. And so now to be able to go hear live music, I think a lot of people maybe appreciate that more.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And then, like, you know, when it comes to kind of the actual performance of it all, I saw an interview recently with Max Weinberg,
Mm-hmm.
the drummer, and he mentioned that, like, you know, when he's on stage, that like Bruce is the only guy that he's paying attention to.
Yeah.
So, you know, when in your experience with playing with Bruce, is that kind of how you treat it as well?
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about this band, and I've said this before, Bruce very much has a jazz musician sensibility in the sense that you could play the same show every night and it'll be good, it'll be great. But the real greatness happens when nobody knows what the is going to happen. Like when it's like, what is next?
Yep.
And like anecdotally, Miles Davis used to pay his guys extra not to practice.
Right.
So then when they came on stage, there was this freshness because nobody knew what was going to happen. And I think Bruce has a little bit of that he knows that like when, you know, all the balls get thrown up in the air and you don't know where it's going to land, the kind of single-minded focus that everybody has to have, that's where we could screw up, but it could also be this unbelievably great thing that nobody expected. That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
So because of that, to answer your question, I always have an eye on Bruce. I'm always keeping an eye on him because we don't know what's going to happen. Like we have the set list, but sometimes we really go off script. And if he's got this very, I call him a wizard. He's a wizard out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this ability to be able to read an audience. And at any moment when this is my perception of it, where he feels a certain thing from the audience, at any moment he'll just change because of what he's feeling, and we go to a different tune.
Yeah.
And that's part of the fun of it. For me, I love that.
Yeah.
I love when just you don't know what's going to happen and you just got to play a heads up ball and just watch him. And he's such a great leader that if you watch him, you're never going to go wrong. He's going to lead us the right, we're going to be fine. You just have to watch him.
Yeah.
If you're not paying attention and you're the guy you don't want to be the guy that screwed up and stepped in a hole.
For sure.
So yeah, I maybe not to the degree that Max does.
Right.
Because I also have to kind of interact with the horn players, and we kind of have to lean on each other a little bit. But I always have at least one eye on Bruce all the time.
For sure. Yeah. And then in terms of, I wanted to mention this because on the current tour, one of the songs that is, in the set every night is Last Man Standing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just you and Bruce.
Bruce, yeah.
Is that pretty wild to have a moment where it's just you and him on stage like that?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I joke that I never in a million years when I was a kid in my room practicing thought that I would be on the stage alone with Bruce Springsteen playing this tune. And that tune in particular, not to get into a lot of personal stuff, but the sentiment of the tune resonates very deeply with me because of a lot of friends that I lost at a young age. And so usually it's a combination of I'm scared to death because you're so exposed.
Yeah.
And the melody is it's like a fragile, there's a lot of fragility to the melody.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you have to play it. If you played it really strong, that wouldn't capture the spirit of it. So there's a lot of sensitivity and subtlety that I try and bring to that melody.
For sure.
And then usually what I do is I think about one of my friends that's no longer with us, and I kind of dedicate in my mind my solo to them that night.
Right.
And so that's but there are times where it's very scary to be out there all alone like that. Because the slightest little chip of slightest little crack, there's no place to hide. And that tune lays very funny on the trumpet. It's in a key and in a register. It's kind of like where it sits is right where, for a vocalist, where your voice breaks from full voice to falsetto.
Right.
So it's just a little fussy in that way, so that makes it even more nerve-wracking. But, I just go out there and again, I just try and put my spirit in the right place and really connect to the sentiment of the tune and try to connect to Bruce. And most nights it's beautiful and people love it. And I think it's beautiful because it's really the only moment in the show that's really like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And what other tracks do you like playing on, on this tour specifically?
I tend to like the more soul influenced R&B influence. So I love 10th Avenue. I love Land of Hope and Dreams. I love The Rising. I tend to like the tunes that are more the rock and soul vibe of the band rather than the straight up rock tunes, obviously because most of the time we have more interesting horn parts and horns might play more of a role in that.
For sure.
Those songs. Yeah.
For sure. And now, kind of looking at everything from a behind the scenes element, what is your routine on a show day?
What is my routine on a show day? Well, I work out pretty much every day. On non-show days, I will usually try and find either a boxing gym or a Muay Thai gym or a jiu-jitsu or an MMA place to go and train. If I don't do that, I go to the hotel gym or I'll do yoga in my room or do push-ups. I do some type of physical thing every day because that's just a part of my life. And then I'll warm up, but I don't practice too much on the day of a show because just, we're doing these 3-hour shows and it's a very physically demanding gig. So I always want to feel like I'm walking on stage and my gas tank is on full.
Right.
On non-show days, then I practice a little more. I'm pretty regimented. I kind of do the same thing. I'm the same way at home. I'm kind of a disciplined guy. I get up early. I go to my, go to the gym, I work out, I practice. Like by noon, I've already kind of accomplished a lot of stuff. And I try to maintain that on the road. I try not to get into the thing of like sleeping all day and like that type of thing.
For sure.
You know, a lot of the places that we go to, I've been to multiple times, so I don't really go out and sightsee because
You've been there.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Unless it's a place that I haven't been, then I go do that. But I kind of, I read. Like I told you earlier, I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist. So sometimes I'll give treatments to people in the band or crew guys. If I'm not doing that, I'm studying.
Right.
Like I'm always like kind of working on myself and working on things like that. I don't really hang out and go to the bar too much. It's not really my vibe.
Right. And then like, when it comes to the show, is it like, sound check pretty early and then you're at the arena most of the day?
Yeah, we're not most of the day. We get there like, mid to late afternoon. It kind of depends on logistics, but Bruce is really great. Like he doesn't kill us on sound checks.
Right.
We do just what we need to do is everybody cool? Everybody's cool. Great. Sounds great. Done. We have dinner and then we're ready to hit, which is great because I have been on gigs where it's almost like you do the whole gig at sound check.
Yeah.
And then for a trumpet player, you're walking out on stage and you're destroyed and that's no fun. So it's great in that aspect. But we always have, throughout the tour, we'll get emails, learn this tune, learn that tune, have these tunes ready. And so there's always work to be done. But I would say that because the band is at the level that it's at, there's a certain efficiency built into things.
For sure, yeah. Well, in the Road Diary documentary, there was one part where they were, the guys who've been with Bruce the longest were kind of joking how like back in the day they would sound check for 3 hours and then go out and play a 3-hour show.
Right.
Now Bruce is just kind of like, yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like the one element that, and I've been in a few different bands that have been together for like Tower of Power is going on, I think, 55 years of being together.
Yeah.
When you're together with guys playing music for that long, the trust element is so strong. Like Bruce knows we're going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever he does, he knows that, like I joke and say, whatever you throw, we're going to catch.
Yeah.
And we know that he's never going to lead us off a cliff. Like, so there's trust and love and all those things that are part of what happens when you play music with people for a long time.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting kind of talking with you as a horn player because another interview that I've done on the podcast, I interviewed the Hot City Horns, who are Paul McCartney's horn section.
Right.
And one thing that I asked them, because I was kind of curious, and since you're sort of in the same sort of role, with a role like this, obviously Bruce doesn't have horns every song.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do in the moments where you get a break during the show?
Usually I'm just on the side of the stage checking the band out,
mm-hmm.
Or I'm underneath the stage checking the band out on the video cameras,
Oh, yeah.
But I'm usually just checking them out. Sometimes I'll get coffee,
Mm-hmm.
It depends. Yeah, pretty much I'm checking the band out and checking the audience out, just like absorbing the energy of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though we're not playing on sometimes a tune or two, like you still have to have your head in the game.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I do,
Yeah. I suppose it's kind of like, in baseball when you
right. That's what I was just thinking, like a hockey team. Yeah, you're still watching what's going on. And,
yeah.
And you have your head in the game. And then if we, like, let's say for example, we don't play on the next 3 tunes, and then all of a sudden he goes off script, then we're really paying attention because
Mm-hmm.
he may go to the next tune that has horns, and
Right.
we need to get our asses up on stage and be ready for it.
For sure.
So I always keep my head in the game until we're back in the vans heading to the hotel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're now going to do the guessing segment,
Okay.
of which, why it's called Guess That Record.
All right.
So I'll just explain the rules for you and any new listeners we may have. So in this bag right here, I have a record from my
Okay.
collection.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you 3 clues about this album.
Okay.
And then we just play a game of 20 questions to try and figure it out. And I'm generous. I give hints if
Okay.
you get stuck. So Barry Danielian, are you ready to guess that record?
I'm ready to do my best.
Okay. So here are your 3 clues.
Okay.
This album was released in the 1980s.
Okay.
It was this band's final album for 20 years. And this band is influential in the yacht rock movement. Question 1.
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, I'll give a hint for you. So, to anyone who isn't familiar, I always get a favorite list or a list of your favorite artists.
Right.
This artist was on that list.
Give me the hint again. In the 80s was the last record that they did after 20 years.
Or it was the last record that they did, and then they didn't do another one again until 20 years later.
Steely Dan.
It is a Steely Dan record.
And what was the release date of the record?
It came out in 1980.
1980. Gaucho? I think
is.
Gaucho. Because Asia was a little before that.
It was Gaucho.
Yeah, Gaucho.
There we go.
Man, there's a tune. I can't remember the tune, but it has Tom Scott and Michael Brecker both playing the sax intro, and their phrasing and time feel is so dope. It's incredible. Yeah. I love Steely Dan.
Yeah. What can you tell the listeners about Gaucho?
Well, I'll broaden it out to what can I tell the listeners about Steely Dan.
Sure.
So I think what I love about Steely Dan is Donald Fagen's voice is so unique. Like he's not really a singer, but he's just got this quirkiness to his voice that the minute you hear him, you know it's him.
Yeah.
And then his stories are, the way he uses words and language is so cool because there's a lot of abstraction to the way he describes things. It's not like clear metaphors that you can follow. There's a lot of abstraction. And then the other thing I love about it is that it's deeply rooted in R&B and soul music in the sense of groove, but then on top of it is this layer of very sophisticated harmony, which I love. I just love the harmony and the sophistication of the harmony. But even though it's sophisticated, if you actually check out the tunes and transcribe it, it's always very much related to the blues.
Yeah.
Blues is always up in there, but there's a lot of sophistication. And then he always had Wayne Shorter, and he would have these great jazz musicians blow over some of these tunes. And on the track Asia, the middle section with Steve Gadd and Wayne Shorter, that might be one of the great moments in modern music.
For sure.
Yeah. So I love Steely Dan. I love that record's great. All of them. I've been a fan. I think I got turned on to Steely Dan by my music teacher in grade school, played me Ricky Don't Lose That Number. And then from then on, I was a fan.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I would say that this is my favorite Steely Dan record. And I think the reason for that is just because I think it's the most atmospheric. You can really just zone out to all the songs on this record.
Yep.
And I would say probably my favorite track is Time Out of Mind.
Oh yeah, that's a great track.
And the reason I love it is because the guitar was played by Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, who is one of my favorite guitar players.
Right.
And that's kind of the cool thing about Steely Dan is that they would bring in lots of people on their records, and it's kind of fun to be Michael McDonald sings on that one.
Right,
and,
right. No, I think that was part of their genius, is that it wasn't about here's our rhythm section, let's do the whole record. It was here's this song, and this guy would really fit great for this song.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how they were thinking, and I think that's what makes their records so beautiful. And Donald Fagen's solo record, Nightfly, was also what a great record.
IGY.
Yeah.
That's the good track. Yeah. It's and the other funny thing is I've often heard how audio engineers will test their speakers by playing Steely Dan records, because they were just to the point of maybe pushing their musicians to the, to the brink,
Right.
spending hours and hours and hours in the studio overdubbing and making sure like it was
Yeah,
absolutely.
the detail in those records is it's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Bullseye.
yeah, gotta say thank you so much, Barry, for taking the time to come on the show.
Pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. It was fun.
Bruce Springsteen is my favorite artist of all time. He is the reason why I became a singer.
Wow.
So to be speaking with someone that is like in the E Street Band, has been with Bruce for a long time, it is a real honor to get to speak with you.
Well, thanks, man. For me, it's an honor to play in his band and to be part of his team. And I tell people all the time, I got the best seat in the house because I get to watch one of the greatest artists of all time do his thing every night.
Yeah.
And it's just inspiring, to see somebody at that level, at this stage of the game, that is still just so committed to his craft. It's inspiring to be around. So I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, we got a gift for you.
Oh,
here.
okay.
So, since we're in Calgary, I thought this would be appropriate for you here. I got you a Calgary Flames hat.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
I played hockey when I was a kid, man.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I started probably when I was 7 or 8 in the Pee Wee leagues, and I played all through high school until I went to Berkeley. I played hockey. I grew up in New Hampshire.
Right.
So like up here, in the north, you play hockey.
What position?
I was a left wing.
Okay, yeah.
So I grew up kind of in the era of Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito and the Bruins, that era of Bruins, they were my team.
Yeah.
So thanks. You guys are like kicking everybody's man.
Well, yeah, they've definitely been... the Flames have done better than I think they were projected to, at least so far. We're kind of like in a bit of a rebuild right now. So, and it's kind of funny because I still actually play a little bit myself. I'm a defenseman.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. I keep on threatening my wife that one day I'll put some skates on again. But no, she's like, no, everything else you do is crazy enough. Stay away from the hockey.
Yeah. Well, the martial arts would come in handy at times. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, that was always the funnest part of seeing hockey games, was the fights.
Oh, yeah. For sure. All right, Barry. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we will see you on the next episode of Guess That Record.